After the deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons know-how for future use. Why would a terrorist regime hide and meticulously catalog its secret nuclear files if not to use them at a later date?
That was Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week making the case against the Iran nuclear deal, claiming that more than 100,000 documents seized by Israeli intelligence prove that the 2015 agreement was based on lies and that Tehran is secretly maintaining its nuclear weapons programs. Netanyahu's presentation Monday in Tel Aviv comes ahead of President Trump's expected decision next week on whether the U.S. will exit the accord. Cliff May is president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and it's good to have you back here, Cliff. What did we learn from that presentation by the Prime Minister that we didn't know before?
Well, some of us knew and some of us didn't, but it's very clear now that Iranian spokesman, not least Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, have been lying. They've been on numerous news programs on TV and elsewhere saying, look, we never had a nuclear weapons program. We don't want a nuclear weapons program. Some would say we had sometimes they claim there was a fatwa against it. And we're not planning a nuclear weapons program for the future. All that was simply untrue, and the Israelis have demonstrated. The Iranians have been lying to our faces and to the faces of the Europeans all this time. They have they had the plans ready to go. We also learned from this a lot. There's more to be revealed, and we haven't translated everything about the people involved in the nuclear weapons program, the sites where this work was being conducted, and the equipment that was being used. This raises a lot of questions that the International Atomic Energy Agency really needs to pursue. They should say, well, we have to investigate and inspect these sites, which we haven't in the past. We need to interview these personalities who have been involved and see what they're up to now. And we have to know where this equipment is. Is it mothballed? Is it dismantled? Is it ready to be reinstalled? All this needs to be known.
All right. But John Kerry and some of the architects of the nuclear deal said, look, this is, we knew this or most of it. And that's why we needed to do the deal in the first place, because we knew Iran wanted to pursue nuclear weapons. That's why we need to contain it with the deal. What's your response to that?
My response to that is John Kerry also said that what were called the PMDs, the possible military dimensions, would be revealed by the Iranian regime. They didn't, and instead what we now know is that there were positive military dimensions to all this. You cannot have an intrusive inspection regime, and that's what Kerry claims we have had, unless you know what the Iranians were doing before, because unless you know that, you can't say, well, let's go where you were producing weapons, nuclear weapons triggers, and let us see if you're still doing that or not. We have not been able to inspect any military sites, as though it were a crazy idea that military sites would be a place where military weapons would be produced. We can ask for it if we have separate intelligence. We have to wait 24 days so they can clean it up, all of that. What we see is that, and what we should understand now, is that this agreement never stopped Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It may have delayed it in some respects, but that's not even clear.
All right.
The Iranian plan, we know, I think from this information, is to get their economy back in shape through the lifting of sanctions, and they've gotten billions of dollars from us, and then at a time of their choosing, go ahead to develop nuclear weapons, which has always been their intention, even as they've denied it.
All right, but the president faces a big decision next week, and he's been negotiating, his administration has been negotiating with Europe to try to get to a common ground about whether to revise the deal, at least agree from this end, than the Western powers, to revise the deal. How close are they? Are they making progress on an agreement?
Probably not. I think there are two possibilities. One is that President Trump will terminate the agreement.
Right.
French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel came to Washington and tried to convince him otherwise. Macron says, I don't think we actually did. So he could terminate the agreement. But the other possibility is that he decides not to terminate for now, but to do a couple of things. One is to impose sanctions outside of the nuclear framework, sanctions for terrorism, sanctions on the missile program, and these are missiles meant to carry nuclear weapons, by the way, sanctions on a bunch of things, sanction the Central Bank of Iran, sanction ICO, which is the Supreme Leader's big economic fund, and increase the pressure with the threat that the pressure will increase a lot more if the agreement is terminated. But then the Europeans can also go back to the Iranians and say, look, you've been saying all along that you've met your commitments, and so the Americans should as well, and you're not going to renegotiate anything. We now know that you haven't met your commitments, that you've been lying to us. We're disturbed by that. If you want this agreement to stay in place, it's got to be fixed. That means at least the worst flaws in the agreement have to be fixed. That means the sunset provisions, which means that at a certain point Iran is welcomed into the nuclear club about 10 years. Right, that has to be fixed. You can't keep developing these missiles.
Before
that's no good. There are a few things. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to finish up here with one point. We only have about 30 seconds, but the president is going to North Korea for a summit. What impact do you think a withdrawal from this deal would have on that psychology of that summit?
Look, I think that the deal that Trump gives to the North Koreans and the deal that Trump gives to the Iranians has to be pretty much the same. And in both cases, he needs to say, you cannot have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. We will do whatever it takes to stop you. If you understand that, we can do business. If you don't understand that, if you think we're going to let you have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them to American territory, then we've got a problem, and we will deal with this problem.
All right. Thank you very much, Cliff May.